Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't.
These days, we hear on 24-hour news channels that the United States is more fractured than ever. We've got red, we've got blue, and never shall the two see eye to eye. Yet in reality, we are more alike than we are led to believe. Think about it. Is there anyone in your life who you love, but who has different ideas as they relate to religion, politics, or any other divisive issue? I can think of many people, and I imagine you can too. Further, Pew Research suggests that our opinions come from our parents, as over 80% of us have ideals that are very close to those of our parents. I am confident there are ways we can find common ground as people whose parents think differently. I am confident there are ways we can find common ground as people whose parents think differently. For this timely episode, I'm welcoming back UC Santa Barbara professor of psychology, Dr. Tania Israel. I first had her on the podcast 4 years ago when she had written her acclaimed book on speaking with people outside our bubbles, and now for her new book, Facing the Fracture: How to Navigate the Challenge of Living in a Divided Nation. Tania shares ways we can connect with people from our shared humanity despite our differences, and she dispels many myths that we are so different as we are being led to believe. So listen in as Tania talks with us about facing the fracture and connecting people who we've been led to believe are so different from ourselves. Dr. Tania Israel, who has asked me to call her Tania, welcome back to Super Psyched.
Hello, Adam. Dr. Dorsey.
I'm so happy to see you. So you are obviously one of my favorites, and here you are coming out with another book on basically the same topic, but just doing it a little differently. Last time we spoke, we talked about going beyond your bubble, your first book, which was phenomenal. And now you're talking about facing the fracture. Let's talk about what you were hoping the reader would walk away with and what might come of this book.
I was so glad you and I got to talk about Beyond Your Bubble when that came out. And it came out right before the 2020 election. And it seemed like something where a resource for being able to have dialogue across political lines was exactly what we needed. And I heard from so many people about how helpful it was to them. They were struggling with their relationships with family and coworkers and friends. But I heard something else too. There were these other people who said, dialogue's not actually my issue. Or they would say, well, it's really nice you wrote this book about how to have dialogue, but I don't want to talk to those people, but I'm still kind of losing it. So what do you got for me? And I honestly didn't think I was going to write another book about politically divisive times and how we get through them. But after listening to so many people talk about the kind of struggles that they were having beyond dialogue, I just felt compelled to share some guidance on this and actually to educate myself about it. I really did a deep dive into the literature, and what came out is Facing the Fracture.
Just a phenomenal title. A person will see it, know what it means. It's got what we would call face validity. There's no question what this book is about, but let's talk about that. What are some of the basic skills that you are hoping to impart?
So the subtitle is How to Navigate the Challenges of Living in a Divided Nation. So one of the things that I've realized is that people are having challenges beyond just their relationships with other people. And one of the reasons people said, I don't want to talk to those people. And I would say, oh, well, what is it about them? They're like, well, I don't want to talk to. And then they would name a politician or some very extremist group. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what's in people's minds. But that's not who most people are. Most people are not the politicians, and most people are not the extremists. But then when I was looking at what's the kind of input that people are getting from the media and from social media and from our own cognitive biases, we are predisposed to, when we think about people who disagree with us politically or people across the political spectrum, we have a very narrow and kind of one-dimensional stereotype in mind of who those people are. So I start out by trying to turn down the volume on that polarizing input. First, by laying out just some factual information that shows that we're not as divided as we think we are. And then going into what is it that the media is offering that we are consuming, like we are gobbling it up, because these really divisive narratives that they have, the emotionally activating material that they give us, we are predisposed to really engage with that, to believe it, to think that people are extreme and ignorant and hostile, all of that.
What's interesting, it's almost like a perpetual zombie movie. It's this in and out group, this tribalism. You are going to the gas station, you have a transaction, you look at the guy behind the counter and ask yourself, is he on my team or is he on the other team?
Oh, yeah.
And it's omnipresent. And Robert Sapolsky talks about the dark side of oxytocin, this endogenous hormone that allows us to feel connected to people. It's the cuddle hormone. And how when we see somebody from our group, our endogenous oxytocin spikes and we feel connected. And when we see somebody who's from the other, it would be more of a cortisol, more of a stress response. And our amygdala might go on to overpower and very, very black and white thinking, which is so dangerous. It's even called a cognitive distortion. We're doing this all the time.
Oh, yes.
So what are some of the myths? You talking about the fact that we're not as divided as we think we are. What does the research say? And perhaps what are some of your experiences about that idea?
I want to get to that. So let's bookmark it for a moment. But I really want to vibe with that thing you're saying about tribal politics. Because as we know, we're psychologists, but not everybody kind of gets this, that humans evolved living in small groups of people or tribes. And the reason that we had to do that is it was a super harsh environment, so we could not survive on our own. We really needed these other people. And so they would protect us and we would protect each other, but not only from saber-toothed tigers, also from the people in those other tribes who were a threat to us because there were limited resources. So I think it's important to recognize that this comes from somewhere and that this is why we're predisposed this way. We're literally wired to respond to people in our own group in these positive, protective ways and to see those other people in other groups as a threat to us. So we're taking this old brain and overlaying it onto our current political situation, right?
1,000,000%.
Absolutely. So this is what happens. Like when you see a bumper sticker or a lawn sign or a hat, then exactly what you're talking about. We're reacting with that fight, flight, or freeze response because we feel a threat. So people say to me all the time, they're like, oh, I feel unsafe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, unsafe. Like, let's get you to safety. And they're like, oh, no, I mean, it's not that they actually think they're in physical danger. But of course, it's the same reaction that we have to physical danger and to any kind of threat that we're experiencing, which we experience that in people from these other groups too.
It's so interesting too, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the houses I've passed, whether in a car or walking, and the physiological responses I have to these particular houses based on the signs that might be in front of them. And it's almost like when we were kids, when we saw the red light, green light video that told us don't get into a car with somebody offering you candy who's not your parent, that type of thing. And it's the same response I get. I see these signs and I suddenly start either loving that house or hating that house. And my old brain is going into what it was programmed to do. The current model is at least 35,000, maybe some estimations are 100,000 years old. And the sad thing about this is there have been no upgrades, and yet our outside environment has changed so dramatically that we just go into the old brain.
That's
and
right.
Maybe the person
where
who has
is our brain 2.0?
Where is our brain 2.0? In the last 20 years, we've had so many iPhones and we have had no upgrades on the brain.
Absolutely. I was visiting a friend recently and their neighborhood put out a lawn sign for an opposing candidate. And we spent the entire time talking about this sign. They were feeling like it was a message to them. It felt like a threat. And it's like, you know what? When I put out a lawn sign, it's usually because I'm enthusiastic about a candidate, not because I'm like trying to put it in the face of my neighbors. So this is another cognitive bias where we perceive ourselves as being motivated by caring, and we see the other side as being motivated by hostility and aggression. So all of this is really playing into how we are perceiving things out there. So now I want to get back to that question you asked before, which is like, how are we misperceiving things? Well, first of all, we are not as far apart as we think we are. Every study that's been done over decades on every single issue has shown that people estimate Republicans and Democrats to be farther apart in their opinions than they actually are. And this is what we call ideological polarization, the distance between our opinions. And it's increased a little bit over time. But what has really ramped up so much more is our affective polarization. So the feelings that we have toward people who hold those different opinions. And that has ramped up dramatically. And that is what's so corrosive to our relationships and our society and even our democracy. Because it turns out that we are overestimating their hostility. We are overestimating the extent to which the other side is willing to circumvent democratic practices and principles. Also, we have these ideas about who they are, whereby Republicans overestimate the extent to which Democrats are gay, Black, godless union members.
You're socialist, right?
And Democrats overestimate the extent to which Republicans are old Southern rich evangelicals. You know, it's like but we have these very specific ideas. We even overestimate their views about us. So we think that they hate us more than they do. We think that they dehumanize us more than they do. That image of the evolution of man from like apes to walking to work, whatever. So they give this to people and they say like, where do you think the other side is on this evolutionary spectrum? And where do you think they think you are? And we think the other side dehumanizes us far more than they do. And the more we think they hate us and dehumanize us and are willing to circumvent democratic principles, the more we want to keep ourselves distanced from them. And the more we're going to justify that our side should also do whatever underhanded things we need to do to make sure that they don't get in power. So that's where it's disintegrating, not just our relationships, but actually our democracy.
So important. And I think about what Benjamin Franklin said around the time of the Revolutionary War: we must stick together or will hang apart. I forget, I'm saying it poorly, but right baked into the name of our country is the United States of America. And the united peace is so crucial. And we overlook the fact that we actually are more united than we believe we are. I mean, I think about that conundrum, that old idea of I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Oh.
And that's what I'm hearing now is there are these abstractions we're creating and hardwiring our brains based on those abstractions that are actually wrong.
Absolutely. I love the name of our country. I love that we're the United States because it addresses both that diversity and that unity. The different states really are different. They have different economies, different cultures, different reasons why people have come to live on that land. There's so much that's distinctive, different geography, but we are stronger together because of our diversity. And we accept a lot of kinds of diversity. And I would say people on the left and the right have different kinds of diversity that they might embrace. But sometimes we'll think about diversity in terms of cultural diversity, in terms of ethnic diversity, in terms of sexual orientation and gender diversity. we're not always thinking about ideological diversity. And it turns out that is actually a strength of our country and one that I would love to see more opportunity to embrace. So in a healthy democracy, we should have different views that we bring to the table. And then the strength of it is in grappling with those views. Well, the more of that affective polarization that we have, the more of that distancing that we have, and the more of that hostility and animosity that we have toward people on the other side, the less capable we are of really harnessing that strength of our country.
Entirely true for me, at least. And I drove Highway 80 all the way across the country and back. And here's what I discovered. First of all, every state has Applebee's. The second thing I noticed, far more salient to our conversation, is that everyone I met was nice. I mean, kind, good. Everyone seemed to genuinely want to help. And that was amazing. Everywhere across the country, people were good. And that was a constant. And then I think about Orville and Wilbur Wright, who famously took us into flight. And they would argue like crazy people over the project, but never make it personal. They'd say, no, it should be this way. And the smarter idea would win. And almost as if it was poetic, what they came to realize that for the plane to take flight, one propeller had to go clockwise and the other had to go counterclockwise. Oh. So it speaks to almost the relevance of the wings themselves as a metaphor and a reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, my thought is you have the best metaphors. It was so good.
Thank you.
We need people who are doing different kinds of things. We need people who have different kinds of values. Our motto, e pluribus unum, out of many, one.
Yes.
And that really is it. But we need to recognize the strength in the many. And we can meet so many really nice people like all across the country. And I just want to say, indeed, there are people who are more hostile, who are angrier, who might even be dangerous. But it's not most people. And this is one of the ways that media really affects us because media is far disproportionately showing us the violence, the extremism, the hostility. They don't show people just going about their daily lives. It turns out like that's not interesting news, but we get an idea of what's going on out there. We talk a lot about misinformation. We talk a lot about lies and fake news and disinformation. It's not that that doesn't exist. It does exist, but in a much smaller proportion than we imagine that it does. And it also doesn't have nearly the direct impact on behavior that we think it does. So we are overestimating its prevalence and its impact. So what's going on here? If it's not misinformation, how is it that the other side is so ignorant and misinformed?
Exactly.
But it turns out we're each exposed to a very small slice of information because our cognitive bias makes us drawn to information that supports what we already believe to be true. And then we dismiss or just ignore information that doesn't support our existing beliefs. So we keep going to the news that basically tells us we're right and gives us more information about why we're right. And then we kind of stockpile all of this great information about how right we are. And then the other side is not exposed to the same information. So we think, well, they're ignorant because they don't know all of this stuff that I know that makes me right. But of course, we don't know all the stuff that they know that makes them right either. I think that a bigger problem than misinformation is misperception.
So complex, yet so simple, yet so complex.
Yes, exactly.
But it's so simple, so true. It's misperception.
Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to get to misperception if you put together media narratives together with our cognitive biases, that those really work in concert to skew our perception of the political divide, of who those other people are, and even of ourselves.
We have a Miss America contest, but we should have a misperception contest. It's just, I'm sorry, bad pun, but I actually kind of mean it. Like, we should actually have a contest of all the freaking misperceptions that are circulating and unpack them and reveal their damn truths. I want a misperception contest. I spoke with two people whose last names are very similar, One is Alex Edmonds, and the other is Amy Edmondson. Alex Edmonds wrote a book called May Contain Lies. The entire book basically is talking about how statistics can be really quite flexible. And depending on who's using those statistics, they can be used to support their confirmation biases. And they can also help support black and white thinking, which we know is not true. We've lost nuance. It's never black. It's never white. It's always somewhere in between. And what I love about the idea of a bunch of rabbis sitting around a table is the smartest idea wins. It's not who generated the idea. It's who came up with the smartest idea. And that's the one that wins. No ego. The smartest idea wins. And I think that was part of the foundation of our country. Thing two, Amy Edmondson, Harvard Business School professor, the creator of the term psychological safety. We have lost psychological safety. We have lost the ability to feel safe and say, yes, I wear a blue hat, you wear a red hat, and vice versa. And can we be ourselves? And can we not just be immediately censored or canceled or whatever? Let's hear the people out and actually care about the right answer, not who generated the right answer.
That's great. I want to give an example of statistics. And so vaccination rates. By the fall of 2021, what people knew about vaccination rates were that Democrats were being vaccinated at a much higher rate than Republicans, like 90% versus 61%. And that's the thing everybody knew about because that's what the media was talking about. It was talking about this partisan disparity in vaccination rates. I wrote an article about this in January of 2022. So I know the number from right then, which is that by January 2022, 86% of the American public had gotten at least one shot of the COVID vaccine. 86%. That's almost all of us. And I found it in one article, like buried really deeply in that article about that. I mean, I got this information from the CDC website. So it's not like I had to look very hard for it. Any journalist could find this out, like what the vaccination rates were. And I thought, what a difference it would have made if the media, instead of promoting this narrative of how divided we are because of these partisan disparities, had said, wow, the American public has really come together in a time of crisis and has acted in unity. And even with our differences in values and even with people's hesitancy around a vaccine that's been rushed through approval, even with how are people going to create the time to do it and recuperate from it, like all of the logistical and everything. No, we actually came together. And what a story that would be. But it's not the story anybody was telling.
That old dictate of if it bleeds, it leads is killing our country. And I believe that anybody who goes into journalism probably goes into journalism with a very, very clean intention. I just want to provide the important news to people so that their lives can be better. Yeah. But meanwhile, the governing bodies, the bean counters, are basically shaping the news so that if it bleeds, it leads, and we get more eyeballs, and boy, isn't that sexy and disturbing. Let's get them scared. Let's get them hooked. Mm-hmm. And it almost feels as though it's not politics who's at fault. It's the people who are controlling the media for the sake of being the number one news channel, whatever that channel will be.
I mean, there are a lot of drivers. We're losing local media at a ridiculous rate, but actually there is some financial aspect to how this runs. So I get that. The other thing is journalists also have biases. It turns out that journalists actually think that the American public is more hostile and more divided than we actually are. So they're showing us that, and then we are perceiving it that way. We can look at what the elected officials are doing. We can look at what the media conglomerates are doing. We can look at all these things. What are we doing? And you know what we're doing is we are consuming that emotionally activating, divisive news like crazy. So we have our phone notifications on, so we know every urgent breaking story that several times an hour there's an urgent breaking story, right? It's not all urgent. It's not all breaking. You can wait till tomorrow to find out about that. So it's how we're consuming it. It's how we're engaging with it. We have control over that. We may not have control over what the media is doing, but we have control as consumers over what we take in and how we engage, what we do on social media. Everybody feels like they have to have their hot take, their opinion right away and post it. And you don't have to.
That feels like a very important ingredient that everybody has to have their hot take. I'm just going to bring in Daniel Kahneman's work of System 1 versus System 2 thinking. System 1 is the fast thinking that we need to be able to do throughout the day, the 1+1 thinking. If you had to think about 1+1, we'd be in a lot of trouble. The System 2 thinking is thinking about things more thoroughly, really, really giving it time to set in and analyzing all of the angles of a thing. And it seems that one of the biggest problems we're having is either A, confirmation bias, like I just want the problem to support what I believe in already, and 2, applying quick thinking for slow problems, for problems that require more thought. So that hot take idea is another important contributor to this polarization, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. The other thing that happens is that we have this idea of what it means to be a politically informed and engaged person. And that's changed over time so that the people who seem to be politically engaged, these are the people who are posting about it on social media all the time. Well, it turns out that people who post about politics on social media are more extreme and actually are just dispositionally angrier people than the people who don't post about politics on social media. So when we're like, oh, wow, people are really extreme and angry, it's not that social media is actually making them that way. It's just that the people who engage in that, they already are kind of hostile. But then we get this impression that the way to be a politically engaged person is to form quick opinions and put them out there, and not in such a way that then there's an exchange, but just posting them. So it also means that there are people who say, I'm not really a political person. I'm not really that informed because I don't do that. I don't have that hot take. So we're getting a real skewed idea of what it means to be politically informed and engaged.
Let's hear a list of tips from you. Yeah. Like, what can we do to help bridge the divide, the fracture, as you call it? What
Absolutely.
Can we do?
So we've been talking a lot about this first part of the polarizing input. So things we can do, we can consume news more wisely. We can be aware that there's a narrative that it's providing for us and that it's supporting a narrative. And we can also be curious about what the other narratives are and recognize that we're just getting one small slice of it. So that's one thing that we can do concretely. But really, one of the things about news and consumption is consume enough to stay informed, but then stop. Some people have the news on constantly in the background, and that's actually not good for us because, again, they need to keep it sort of more hostile and more emotionally activating to keep us engaged. And that's not good for our bodies to stay at that level of activation. So that's something that we can do. Turn off all those notifications. Just in terms of our relationship with our social media and our phones, limit that as well. There's a lot going on about like for kids and what the impact is, but my gosh, for adults also. So when we reduce our engagement with other people's social media accounts and our own, and instead increase our engagement with three-dimensional human beings in our environment. So I have a whole piece about participating meaningfully in community and country. There has been a decrease in volunteerism over time, and volunteering not only helps our organizations and our community, but it also is good for our mental health. And it doesn't have to be anything political. Sure, it can be. You can register people to vote. You can canvass, all of those things. But you can also coach soccer. You can be a literacy tutor. You can participate in a park cleanup. Anything that you're doing where you're engaging with other people in an activity where you're working toward the same goal is really a positive kind of engagement. Turning away from our screens and toward other human beings would be a great move for us.
You know, as you're describing this 24-hour news cycle, I'm almost feeling like we're World War I soldiers in trenches all day. And I go to people's houses, it's on. I go to a sushi bar last week, it's on. I was even at a resort in a very sunny vacation place. And guess what's on in the exercise room while you're supposed to be on vacation? So it's problematic that this is almost like water. I mean, it's just around us. It seems like it's going to quench our thirst, but it's quenching a bad thirst. And I think that's great. Volunteerism, on the other hand, as you were just describing, brings us together. I mean, you don't have to be on any side of the aisle to come together to do something good. Just as I was talking about when I was going across the country, everybody was nice. What about that? And what about us coming together like that and providing a good right wing and a left wing that helps this thing fly?
Yeah. And we talked about kind of turning down that polarizing input, which can give us a sense of equilibrium. But there's also, and I think you'll appreciate this as a psychologist, there are some things we also need to build if we're going to prepare ourselves really for some of the challenges, like we were just talking about. You're encountering a lawn sign or a bumper sticker or whatever. What goes on physiologically, we need to have some capacity to face challenging situations or things that feel threatening that aren't actually dangerous. And so just learning how to manage those emotions can be really helpful because people feel traumatized by it. But even if you look at trauma therapy or trauma-informed therapy, there's nothing that says the thing that we should do always is to avoid. The thing that we need is a range of options that we can use and skills and strategies that we can use. And then we need to be able to distinguish when should we use one versus another one. So this is one of the things we need more tools in our toolkit to be able to face these situations. So we might think, all right, well, sometimes I want to create boundaries and I want to not do that. But sometimes I'm going to want to face a challenge and I'm going to want to have the ability to do that if that's what I'm choosing to do. So some of the resilience skills that we can develop are important. And then just skills about how do we broaden our minds? If we are affected by cognitive biases, what is it that we can do to see beyond that? And so there are things like perspective taking. There are things like developing more intellectual humility that can be helpful there. And then opening our hearts. I don't start with compassion, I have to say, because people then are like, do I have to be compassionate toward? And they'll, again, extreme leader or organization. But once we've gotten to the point where we recognize that people aren't those terrible people over there, we can build some skills. And part of that includes how do we experience compassion and empathy in such a way that we can direct that not only toward the people in our own tribe, but the people in the other tribe as well.
And maybe even realizing that the people in the quote other tribe are really, really similar to us. I love that TV show Lost. I wasn't crazy about its ending, but there was a lot of tribalism in that show. And what we found is that there was a lot more confluence between the people of those, the others is what they were called, and the people that we came to love. Tania, is there anything I should have asked but didn't? Because otherwise I'm going to my final question.
Well, there's something you wouldn't know to ask because most people are not even, it's not on their radar, but there is a bridging movement in our country, a really vibrant movement, more than 500 organizations that are working on bridging divides and strengthening our democracy.
More than 500.
Yes, it's so exciting. It's one of the most encouraging things that I have learned more about in this journey. So one that I think is doing some really cool stuff this summer is called Raft for America, where they're bringing together Democrats and Republicans to go whitewater rafting
Get out of
together.
here. Best idea ever.
I know, but it sounds really dangerous if you're thinking, oh my gosh, these people are going to want to push me out of the raft. But it turns out that, again, when you bring actual human beings together and they are working together toward a common goal, then they recognize the humanity in each other and they support each other and they see each other in more multidimensional ways and not just as stereotypes. So the thing I'm going to tell you is before that, go to listenfirstproject.org and sign the Listen First pledge. Because when you do that, it's on Listen First Friday, you get an email about something that one of these organizations is doing. And it's so good to know about this because with all of the negative stuff that we're getting in the regular media, if we can also fill our environment with some very positive things happening, it will not only make you just feel better, will give you faith in our fellow Americans and optimism about the future of our country in a way that other things are not giving you those messages.
Well, those are 24-hour news channels I want. I'm going to ask you my final question. If you had the powers, the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of the individual, and since we're all connected, perhaps others as well, what would that insight or skill be? And how do you imagine it would impact the individual as well as society at large?
So often when we state what our ideas are, we put them out there to say, here's my idea. You should agree with me. Sometimes we'll say, this is my idea, like this is what I'm thinking, and this justifies my behavior or my perception of things. We so seldom put something out there and say, this is the way I'm thinking about this. These are the limitations of my understanding. What am I missing?
I love that idea. It's almost as if you're importing the idea of being a good scientist and saying, by being a little bit more scientific and saying, here are the limitations.
Yeah.
You're also imbuing more humanistic ideals.
Yeah. If we can see other people as a resource to help us to get out of our narrow biases rather than as a threat to us. So if somebody's got a different opinion, it's like, oh, fantastic. They can help me to see a different view. And actually, it's empowering to understand a perspective beyond our own. And we so seldom see it that way. And so I think that's what I would want to put out there for people to do.
So good. And I've clinked glasses with many people whose political differences are vastly different from my own. And the common humanity is there. And would they help me out when I was in a pickle? Yeah, they would. So that's what the United States is in its finest form. We help each other in spite of perhaps some different ideals. So I'm so glad you're doing this work. You are the person to carry this. And I hope that it spreads like a Johnny Appleseed's trees did, although he was probably not real. But you are. And
and we're all in this. Like we all have the ability to do something in these divided times that are going to make us feel more empowered and even optimistic.
Well, from your mouth to our ears, I thank you. This has been great, Tania.
Thank you. I love talking with you. Always so good.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.